camera movement does not automatically make a shot better. It can make a shot worse.
How do you decide when to move the camera?
Well, again, I primarily defer to the director, but I'm not one of those people who likes gratuitous movement. I've worked on shows. There are certain styles of filmmaking where gratuitous movement, and it's just like, always keep the camera moving. I like it to be motivated. I like there to be a reason for it to be moving. And I just intuitively, it's like when I'm in that space, I'll feel that moment where I'm like, you know, we really should go from here and then slide over to that person, or, you know, just how cool, we got to follow them in through this door and outside. I would probably like to move the camera a little more than I do, but when you move the camera, it can complicate lighting because you have to hide stands, you're seeing more of the space. You have to have a, you know, and if I was given a choice between moving a camera or doing cool lighting, I would probably do the cool lighting. I know people who do less than cool lighting to permit more camera movement, and you know, again, that's a legitimate aesthetic, but it's not my preferred aesthetic. But in a perfect world, you could have both. And again, like I said, I just unmotivated movement. It's a distraction. I think even with lighting, I mean, you could do cool lighting that doesn't complement a scene, you know, and it should never be about making yourself look good. It should be about complementing the actors and complementing the story, you know, telling that story in a way that the people lose themselves in it. You know, one of the things that visual effects artists often say is that our best work is the work that nobody notices. And I feel that that's kind of true for me. I mean, I always like it, of course, when people say, well, that was really pretty and that was beautiful. But I hope that it's because it complemented that moment, and that they, you know, they saw these two people in love and it was just so beautiful, and not that it was like distracting in some kind of way, because that's not, you know, that doesn't serve the higher purpose that we're all supposed to be there for.
When you shot the video store, one location,
Yeah.
teens, sort of sounds like a thriller type movie. What were you focusing on? Movement or lighting, or how are you making it interesting within that one space?
Well, you know, there was a little bit of all of the above. You know, the director, Rolf Konevsky, is, you know, just really passionate about coverage. He has lots of different ideas about getting a variety of coverage on scenes. And again, we had motion where we needed to have it. And some of the things that we did to keep that movie interesting, you know, in the beginning of the movie, they're all standing up and they're talking. And so we kept, like, the top half of the walls had colored bands on them, and they had colored neons. And the bottom halves of the walls were gray. And so we came up with a design where the lighting would evolve. And in the beginning, it's just, you know, a very neutral, fluorescent lit thing with these neon signs. And then this conflict occurs, and at first people, it's like all fun and games. And so they turn off the fluorescent lights, and I motivated from those neons, I put my own lights above them, and I match those colors, and it's like, now it's kind of a nightclub. So I'm like, you know, they're having fun. It's kind of a nightclub feel. And then things get more serious, and those lights go out. And there was a dramatic motivation for that to happen. And then there's a confrontation where these spotlights are shining through the windows, and it became almost monochrome. And the angles, there were a lot of angles like this. So you're not seeing the colored bands anymore. You're seeing the gray, you're seeing the ceiling. So all of those things, you know, I was like, I remember thinking, man, if it looks the same for 90 minutes, it's going to be so boring, and it's not going to be dramatic. And so the lighting had to be a partner with that story and create those moods. And, you know, to Rolf's credit, he created that justification in the story and with the characters. And we had just a hell of a lot of fun with it. It was, you know, one of the things I love about both that movie and California Christmas is the variety of looks. You know, I do, like, I love the look of Cook County, but it's mostly this kind of grim, raw look, which is a cool look. But like in California Christmas, you've got the breakfast scene, and you've got the barn at night where they're, you know, lifting the food, and you've got the party with the red, and you've got the bar with the blue, and you've got outside the bar. You've got all these different looks, and that's just, man, that's so much fun. And those are the ones I'm proud of. And so it was the same thing with this movie Tomorrow by Midnight, is you just have all these really different looks. And that also, for an audience member, it disconnects them from what came before, because it's like, you know, okay, this is a whole new thing. You know, we've gone to another place, and that was important for the story. And it was important to keep the visuals fresh again, so people aren't just going, oh my God, it's that wall again.
How does camera movement make a shot better?
The first thing that I would say is that camera movement does not automatically make a shot better. It can make a shot worse. You know, that would be like saying, how does drinking a margarita make things better? You know, sometimes it does, and there are other times that, well, it probably wouldn't be the best thing. So, you know, in terms of the ways in which it does make it better is, you know, for instance, if we're slowly moving into somebody as they're having a realization, and that dawning is happening on their face, and as they're having the realization, we're pushing in, we're getting close, we're getting intimate, we're getting uncomfortably close to them. The audience is, you're carrying them along, and you're like, oh my God, I'm right in their face, and that emotion is just huge. You know, that's awesome. You know, or if you're discovering something, you know, you're on a steady cam and you're following them, and it's like, what is it? You know what? And you see them and they're looking, and it's like, oh my God, you know, whatever. You know, things like that where you know, again, you are the audience's proxy, you know, and how is it interesting to them? Is it interesting to them to just sit and watch these people talk, blah, 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 you know? Or do we feel we want to take that audience and let's get them in closer, you know? Or let's do a move where we suddenly don't see this person's face, you know, and they're going to be thinking, why don't I see that person's face? You know, what are they saying? What are they doing? What are they looking at? You know? I have this really favorite story from Rosemary's Baby, and the cinematographer was talking about, there's a scene where Ruth Gordon is on a phone, sitting on a bed, and the camera's at the end of a hall. And the director said, okay, you know, set the camera up. So he got Ruth Gordon on the bed, and she's perfectly framed, you know, within the door, and he sets up the camera. It's this great shot. And the director comes and he says, no, move the camera over. And he says, okay. So he moves the camera over, and the director says, no, move it over some more. And he moved it over so far that all you see is Ruth Gordon's back. You don't see her face. And this guy's like, okay, well, that's really weird. So they finish the movie. They go into the theater. The DP is sitting there watching an audience watch the movie. That scene comes on, and the audience goes to see around the door. Now, that's not an example of a move, but that is an example of where are you taking the audience with your camera, you know? And really, when you get them to that point, you know, where they are like so engaged with this two-dimensional projection of light that their primal instincts kick in, and against common sense, they lean to see around the corner, you know. Again, just like the idea of the Steadicam where you're leading them, you know, through this place. It's like you're building anticipation. What am I going to see? I'm with that character. What's going to happen to them? What's going to come out of over there? You know, or you know, that emotional moment where you get right up into the face. So, you know, again, to me, that's really what it's all about. It's about, you know, with the audience, like, how are you pushing those primal buttons in such a way that even a non-verbal proto-human would respond to.
When have you been the most terrified on set, and what is the scariest shot you've ever gotten?
Well, the most terrified I ever was on set, gosh, years ago now, I worked on this MTV show called Senseless Acts of Video. And the premise was that they took scenes in music videos, crazy scenes that were achieved by VFX, and replicated them as stunts. And had some good time shooting that. That was a fun shoot. But there was this one particular scene. We had this guy named Troy. He was our stunt man. And he had what's called a wingsuit. And in base jumping, that's people who basically just jump off of buildings and cliffs and crap with a parachute. So pretty scary stuff. And one of the things in base jumping is this wingsuit where, like Rocky the Squirrel, you spread your arms and these little bits of material come out. And I mean, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't keep you aloft, but it lets you kind of, rather than going straight down, it lets you get a little bit of soaring before you deploy your parachute. And we were shooting in the Grand Canyon where he was gonna jump off. And I have a fear of heights. And part of my fear of heights is because I'm kind of clumsy. And I just, you know, I don't want to stumble over something and go over the edge, because I'd be that guy. I'd be the guy in the news that went over the edge. And I remember we were shooting in an area that was Native American territory. So it didn't have the fences and the railings. I mean, it was literally just, there's the edge, there's oblivion. And some of the guys are like, oh my God, let's go look over the edge. You know, oh, that's awesome, 1,800 feet down. Brett, come look, come look. I'm like, hell no. I wouldn't get within 6 feet of that edge. I figured if I'm gonna fall, I'm gonna have something to land on. So I didn't do it. And because of the nature of the stunt, we had a lot of cameras. And these were like TV sports cameras, you know, the ones with the really big lenses, the super long zooms. We were shooting it on video. And I think I had, gosh, 6, 8 cameras, plus I had a bunch of cameras mounted on this. There was also a plane. I remember I got there and I asked the crew, I wanted to be fair. I said, who's afraid of heights? And nobody said they were afraid of heights. And I said, fine, I'm gonna be on the camera at the bottom of the canyon. And you guys are gonna be on the ones around the edge. They cabled them in. Everybody had like a cable tied off to a stake or something. And the cameras were just right there. And I was like, oh my God, but I would take a helicopter and go down, which was also interesting because in the canyon, because the air is going through the canyon, it's very turbulent. So as you go down, it's like, ah. But even I was okay with that because, you know, as long as there's something between me and eternity, I'm okay. So even though that was uncomfortable, it was much better than standing at the edge of the canyon. But later on, after we wrapped, some of those guys were like, I was just shitting myself. And I'm like, you said you weren't afraid of heights. I was being diplomatic because if they had, I mean, I don't know what I would have done, drawn straws or something, but I would have tried not to make anybody who was uncomfortable do it. But that was to me, the scariest moment on set. In terms of the scariest shot, wow. I don't have one offhand, but well, I do have one actually. Yeah. So we had, you know, this was 2002 and there were no digital cameras. There were no GoPros. And I had an Arri 3, which is, you know, big 35 millimeter camera. And we were mounting them onto bikes to get these really hot shots. And we had one mounted on the left rear tire of a bike. And it was mounted with this rigging called doggy cam, which at the time was new, and it was these thin rails as opposed to speed rail, which is this big, big, much more rigid stuff. And the stunt was that the bike was supposed to drive right at this car and at the last minute veer off, just a near miss. And so we rigged it. Now, one of the things was we had so many stunt riders on that we had exhausted, at least as I was told, we had exhausted the experienced people, and they had brought in trick riders, people from Vegas who do hot rod stuff that's, not necessarily precision movie stunts. And I don't know if this person was one of those. I really don't. But we did have some people who were taking chances that, the director, the second unit director, who was a professional rider, he was like, don't do that. That's not what you're supposed to do. But these guys were hot doggers. But anyway, on this particular one, I remember I was standing on the road, and I see in the distance this car coming, and I see him just getting smaller and smaller. And then all of a sudden there was like this explosion of black particles. And he veered, and I realized what happened is he got so close that the camera impacted the front of the car, blew into a billion pieces. And I'm like, my God, if that hadn't been doggy cam, if that had been speed rail, it would have twisted him up under the car and he would have been dead. And I'm just like, son of a bitch. And the line producer, who, thank God is still a good friend today, but he was so mad, understandably, that camera was destroyed. And he's like, Brad, you destroyed a camera. And I'm like, Mike, it was rigged where it was supposed to be. It was rigged appropriately. And that dude just did not time his move. He did not gauge his distance. And I just, I hate, making excuses, but I'm like, I had no control at that point. And, thank God it was rigged safely so that it fell apart instead of taking him under the car. So yeah, that was probably one of the scariest, because in that moment I was like, my God, what happened, and is that dude gonna die?
How long did it take you to get over to where that you saw him get smaller and smaller?
I don't even remember. I don't even know if I went over there. I probably did, but it's like, that's the only part of it I remember, is like, son of a bitch. And I just remember that thing blowing into all those. I wouldn't have thought a camera could do that. It just shattered.